introduce Ms. Bela Raza Jamil, the CEO of Idare Talimo Agahi, to please present the findings of ASER.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम एवरीवन। मुझे इतनी खुशी हो रही है कि यहाँ पे आज एक भरा हुआ हॉल है और उसमें ख़ुसूसी तौर पे मेरे पास असर के वॉलंटियर्स जो नए हैं वो भी मोबिलाइज हो गए हैं फेडरल डायरेक्टरेट ऑफ एजुकेशन के स्कूल से, but to have our eminent panelists with us and all of you, as I said, I think we said in the opening, are multipliers for action for foundational learning and education in Pakistan. Without much ado, we are starting because we have one of our panelists who has to leave early. So we'll go through this and then I will ask for her to say her remarks. We'll launch this together and then we will continue with the panel, if that's fine by all of you. Without much ado, let's start on the ASER findings. These are the national findings for ASER Pakistan 2023. This is our 12th report. The report by the citizens of Pakistan who take great pride in working alongside government to be able to see how we are accountable for actions for learning and education in our country. It is absolutely vital that each one of us who's looking at this data set and looks at it, that these are samples, but these are important to see, these are large-scale samples, to be able to give us that kind of comfort level that we are beginning to see from the Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training, from the Pakistan Institute of Education, a spate of 3 reports produced in the last 4 weeks to be able to showcase what is happening, and the government and the people of this country are serious. This is a call to action to the new governments who are coming in, and we want to be able to see and share this data boldly as much as possible as a public good, open to all, as a public resource, anytime, open source. We are at your service because that is the spirit of the people of this country. And I think that's the key message for us, that we must be able to measure early, measure all, and measure well. So let's start with the findings that we have for 2023. And it is important to note that after the floods of 2022, it has captured some of the data of the floods, the climate change and emergency, but also be able to see a slightly better year of 2023, more stable, but who knows, we are again in the midst of floods and midst of climate change crisis. Let's proceed. So we've said it's citizen-led, it's household-based, but the tools can be used anywhere, and the simplest of tools at grade 2. Please feature. And we are looking at assessment tools which are looking at grade 2 level competencies mapped to the national curriculum of Pakistan, and which are looking at reading in Urdu and Sindhi, arithmetic, English, and general language. And we are looking at how children at class 2 level with the SLOs, the student learning outcomes, can perform in these 3 basic areas. Next, please. The tools are simple, accessible, anybody can get anywhere. And please, we also would like to welcome you to the ASER mobile app, which is available to everyone. And when the ASER data next time happens, and we'll let you know when it will happen, even in 2024, of a different kind for political constituencies of this country, you can go to the ASER mobile and to see how that data can be picked up. So in the days of technology, it is important that we democratize our data, make it more powerful for our people, make it accessible for anyone. And these young students are soon going to be using the same app for the work that they do. Move, please. Next, please. It is important to see the national ASER sampling methodology and the sample size. This is a 2-stage stratified random sampling, which has always been done for rural surveys of ASER, where the villages are the primary sampling units and households are the secondary sampling units. We have 30 villages from each district, which are the PSUs, and are selected using the probability proportional to size PPS method. So we have 600 households per district, and this is how it is. For the urban survey, we had the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics help us with another sampling methodology. So right now we are using 2 sampling methodologies, but hopefully we will immediately have eventually one sampling methodology which is acceptable to all. We will be working with the Pakistani Institute of Education, the ministry, to come up with that so that we have one seamless sampling methodology for the national survey. But the size is very prominent. 151 rural districts, 123 districts, urban districts, overlapping of course with rural districts, 4,381 villages, 1154 enumeration blocks in urban areas, and we're looking at 272,370 children of ages 3 to 16 captured here. And the first time we have 1993 transgenders. We were given a call to action here by a transgender, and I hope some of you will be joining us soon, who said, where are we in 2018? And we said, we really apologize. And we're beginning to see more because we're seeing transgenders, movements for transgenders happen in this country. There's a country which is democratically giving the rights to transgenders to get their entitlements. There's programs like Awaz 2 in which we are also involved, which are helping people from the grassroots to go and claim their rights. And similarly, we have the number of children assessed altogether, 200,987, out of which 84,216 were girls and 1,272 were transgenders as well. Please, next slide. So the disclaimer basically says that these are two sampling methodologies on the basis of which we are today claiming a national report with those caveats. Next, please. Next. And it is important for us to see, and I will be referring to trends as well, but we look at early childhood education, which is, I think, the cornerstone for education and foundational learning. We cannot have a conversation on child rights and foundational learning without looking at early years. And we are seeing a significant number of children in early years at 42%, which was 40% in 2021 ASER. Now, this is a slight increase, but the question always is, what are we doing with early childhood? If we do not have enough money to invest, and Waseem Saab, yourself, and the new governments, if the resources are not going to be there, the children will just languish and get depressed and demoralized. And it's important to capture our foundational learning challenge and targets right there, more holistically than ever. We look at ages 6 to 16, and we look at, again, an improvement in 2023 for children who are enrolled at the national level at 88% and at rural at 86%. This is no mean number. The demand for education is increasing, and we're seeing that more and more people are wanting to be in education. They're demanding education, and we're looking at the government share as being significant in rural areas and also at the national level. When we look at the urban sample, we'll see almost a reverse picture. Next, please. We see a shift in enrollment from government to private, and if you remember, in 2021, we saw that there were 19% private school-going children and 81% government. But this was immediately during the COVID period. But we have gone back to 2019 levels of 23% children in rural areas in private sector and 77% at the government level, in government schools. So the responsibility lies on the shoulders of government in a very significant way. Keep thinking of resources. Our call to action is resources. There is a demand. We need to respond. Next, please. When we look at the enrollment levels, look at Azad Jammu Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh, and Balochistan. And these are in front of us, the kind of challenges they are. Now, we are using a household methodology where whether children are going to madrasas, non-formal, any kind of education system, and of course, the government system are all being captured. And I think this merits, again, a deeper dive to understand that we are capturing large numbers of children who are enrolled. And we are still having the challenge of those unenrolled. Let's go to the next one. And of course, we also wanted to share with you the 93% children in ICT. ICT is now a declared urban district. So therefore, everything in Islamabad Capital Territory is there. And compared to 21, which was, we see an increase in enrollment in Islamabad Capital Territory for 6 to 16, and 50% children going to early years in Islamabad Capital Territory. Here we have a reverse situation with 68% children in private schools in early childhood and 32% in government schools. And for the 6 to 16, we see 59% children in private schools and 41% children in government schools. So the non-state proportion is always higher in urban areas. Next, please. The gender gap is narrowing. So there's a tendency in Pakistan, I said, I don't know why we laugh enough. Why don't we smile enough? Why we are not happy enough? Why don't we celebrate enough? There is an interesting shift that we are beginning to see the gender gaps narrow as per the ASER sample. But we are seeing more girls and boys going to school compared to 2021. Let's talk about it. It is International Women's Day. Let's be more assertive. Let's demand what needs to be demanded for the girls of Pakistan. Next, please. But when you look at income inequalities and you look at the quartiles or wealth indexes that we create, we see that girls, the poorest girls who are out of schools are 33% compared to 19% of the richest girls. This is looking at the rural sample. Of the poorest households, you have intra-wealth disparities in the same homes. So you have 33 girls who are out of school, and we have seen that less boys, 22 boys are out of school in the same lowest, poorest wealth quartile. This is important to see, that when the homes are poor, they make choices, and then when they have to make choices, those choices are very cruel indeed. And I've seen too many of those in too many villages and too many homes of this country. And where you see the girls and boys in the richest quartile, there is hardly any difference. So it is important for us to see and not just look at large numbers, but look at disaggregated figures to understand what the challenge is. That's where our challenge is. That's where the resources need to go. Next, please. This is a big challenge that we have, especially in rural areas, where you begin to see that there is not enough provision of education at post-primary levels. It's not by choice that children are not going to school. It's because there is no facility. These are fundamental child rights issues in Pakistan that they need to see how the supply side challenge has to puff up. And again, a message to the new governments coming in. They are familiar, but they need to do something about it. Next, please. Always remember that we are looking at, interestingly, we started ASER in 2008 and 9, and we were looking at 5 to 16. In 2010, we had the right to education provision in the Constitution of Pakistan as a fundamental right. In 2015, we had the SDGs, and look how the two coincide. But we have a story of a sad story to tell on 25A. And you keep watching and you keep absorbing, because if you are not going to be the mouthpieces for 25A now, almost 14 years down the road, when will it happen? And then look at the learning levels, that what we are really all about. This is a call to action for learning. Next, please. So here we are looking at the national story on the top, always improved because it's looking at urban and rural, all the households. We're looking at 55% children in grade 5 who can read Urdu or Sindhi, and this is still at grade 2 level. English, 56% children, and arithmetic, 48% children who can do two-digit division. Compared to 2020, and then we look at the rural for 2023, and look at 21, sorry. And we look at 50%, 54%, and 46%. And these are the challenges that we are seeing. We are seeing things improve and things dip in learning, particularly from 2019 onwards, when the ASER, when we saw the COVID and the floods. Next, please. If you look at the comparison of learning in 2023, you look at Azad Jammu Kashmir at 60% at division arithmetic, 76% at Urdu and Sindhi and Pashto, and English at 70%. And similarly, when you look at Punjab and you look at Gilgit-Baltistan, you see that the data sets are looking impressive. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is still dipping, and we need to be able to see that whilst we see enrollments go up, do we see learning go up also at the same time? And those are our big challenges. Next, please. And we look at learning levels in ICT, Islamabad Capital Territory, sort of this is combined now. You look at grade 3 levels and who can do story level, which is where they should do story levels. You're looking at almost 39% children in grade 3 versus 60% in grade 5. And we're looking at English, 42.7% or 43% in grade 3 and 62% in grade 5. And for arithmetic, two-digit division, we're looking at 43% children in Islamabad Capital Territory and in grade 3 and 56% in grade 5. It is important to keep reminding ourselves that it is essentially a tool for grade 2 level competencies, which is reasonable to assess at grade 3 when children have spent some time. And remember, we take the ASER survey normally in September, from September to November. That's when children have spent some time in their new grades. That is, if their calendar year, academic calendar year, begins in April every year. Right now, only Sindh begins its academic calendar year by declaration in August. Otherwise, all begin in April. Next, please. So if you look at gender, again, the story is that we, over time, and we will share with you those trends, we are looking at gender gaps coming down at learning levels, but still girls remain behind boys and boys outperform. The gaps are narrowing, but they are still there. And you know, they can be anywhere from 5%, 4%, 3%, but this is what we need to capture and build on and make sure that some of this really goes away. And we have, of course, some areas where girls are outperforming boys as well, including Islamabad Capital Territory and Punjab significantly in 2 out of 3, and even in Gilgit-Baltistan. Next, please. So when we look at the gender-wise learning, and this is really to highlight the challenges of our transgenders, to be able to see that where you're beginning to see in rural areas, male, female, transgenders all together at 5 to 16, you are looking at 55, 54% girls and boys, but then you see 38% for transgenders, and similarly for transgenders at 39% and 35%. They're there. We have to give attention, recognize their rights, and to be able to say what we have to say, to be able to give entitlements to all children. Remember Article 25 of the Constitution of Pakistan, and it's a very important fact that everyone is equal before law and the Constitution. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Our Minister from Gilgit-Baltistan, please. And this again we are looking at, so we are looking at by school type, we are looking at public and private schools, and again we are seeing that the gaps are coming down from what they used to be for private sector versus public education, but still we see private institutions are doing better than government schools for both literacy and numeracy. And in some provinces you will see some variations in your report. So I think it's important to see when we saw a very imbalanced situation, teachers were not coming, learning was not happening, things are changing. Things are changing, stay with it, demand more action. That's important. Please, next slide. Multi-grading, sir. These are big issues. For example, in Punjab, they haven't done any hiring in the past 8 years. Now, how will you avoid that? And our multi-grading crisis is really the crisis of, which should not be the bottom of the pyramid, it should be the top, where in primary schools, we have the worst conditions. 1 and 2 teacher schools, not acceptable. Now, PI has great data to be able to pull out, at least from the public sector, that where are the schools with just no teacher, 1 teacher, 2 teachers. That won't do. Anything for learning will not happen. So you cannot look at learning without context of multigrade. This is not multigrade by choice. It's not like in Australia or some places where they prefer it, but scattered populations or whatever. This is by default because we don't have teachers. And we've seen that in 23, 1% may have come down. Assalamu alaikum, sir. We have our chief guest who has just joined us, Rana Tanveer Saab. That's what's going to be the story of success of our amazing parliamentary leaders who are committed to education as you have been, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. And sir, I was saying that in multi-grade rural, we see still 39% children, 39% schools, primary schools at grade 2 level. So we look at grade 2 and we look at grade 8. The story still is sad for grade 2 of 39% children, schools in grade, in government schools still having multi-grade. What kind of fundamental foundational learning will you have when you have multi-grade teaching and children are not getting the kind of attention? In primary schools, mercifully, everything seems to have come down. And so our focus, generally speaking, whether it is for head teachers, we don't have a head teacher in primary school, by the way, anyway. We have head teachers in elementary and secondary. They have a drawing and dispersing powers. They have all the powers. So things get better at post-primary. But don't many of our kids end up being in post-primary. Please look at this. This is what needs action. Citizens, bachche, all of you, ye action hai. Jahan pe multi-grade hai. You're lucky in federal directorate schools not having it. Those kids that are sitting with three classes to one teacher is not going to do it for foundational learning. Next, please. And of course, we've seen tuition trends drop back to 2019 levels. They went up in government. We never saw government schools, children taking tuition levels because they are coming from poor homes. They cannot afford that. So they have dropped back to the 2019 levels. 7% of children in government schools going to tuitions, 22% in private. And that's the enigma of private schools. You pay more so that you can, so the learning effect that we saw, the increase in learning in private schools, is the tuition effect as well. So could be also educated parents. But this data is available for anyone to use. Next, please. Let me move quickly. Household indicators we thought we should put here first. You've asked many questions and thematically. Next, please. Because we went to so many, over 100,000 households is not a small number to get to. This is much larger than the PSLM data sets and so on. But when you look at that, you see, of course, what's happening in households. This is in the rural areas. We see 85% having mobile phones, 61% smartphones.